I want other sporting events to take note because we're not going anywhere.
Hello, Birmingham, you all right?
We are ready.
Let's go.
This is what we've been working towards, this huge moment of visibility for LGBT people across the Commonwealth to feel seen and to feel acknowledged.
For the last 300 days, over 7,000 baton bearers have carried the Queens Baton across the Commonwealth in the name of their chosen cause. And now, completing this epic journey, please welcome our final baton bearers, starting with 5 times Commonwealth medal winner for diving, Tom Daley. Tom is running in support of LGBT plus rights and tonight has been joined by flag bearers representing some of the 35 Commonwealth countries where homosexuality is still a crime. He runs in solidarity with all LGBT plus athletes and communities.
This was an incredibly emotional moment, but this wasn't about me. This is about every single LGBT person around the Commonwealth, around the world, that they might have seen that tonight and been given a little bit of hope. Even if it can make the smallest difference to someone out there, it was all worth it, because someone today might have seen that and felt a little less alone in the world. Big things come from small beginnings, and today, the Commonwealth Games made history. But the Olympics, the Football World Cup, and Formula One still have a long way to go. I just see this as the start. I want other sporting events to take note because we're not going anywhere.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to I Am Remarkable Week 2022, and what a way to start. Now, for those who don't remember or don't know, I Am Remarkable is this global movement that empowers everyone with a focus on women and underrepresented groups to celebrate their achievements in the workplace and beyond. To date, more than 400,000 people have attended workshops in more than 170 countries and in over 100 companies. This year, we are celebrating our 3rd Global I Am Remarkable Week, which is the highlight event of our entire year, where we celebrate all things remarkable. And this week is running from the 28th of September until the 30th of September, and you can join all sessions through our website. Now, my name is Pedro Pina. I lead YouTube in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. But today, I'm here not to talk about that, but to talk about something even bigger. By far, the most exciting part of I Am Remarkable Week is, for me, in this year, our conversation that we're going to have right now with Tom Daley, and it's an honor to be hosting this event today. To give you an overview of the session, first, we're going to have this conversation with Tom and hear his views on risk-taking, on creating a community, coming out in a sporting world, and what makes him truly remarkable. You've seen the video. It doesn't take much to figure out what that is, but we'll have a conversation about that. We will then have some time for some Q&A at the end. So please type in your questions on the chat box, and we will, bring up the questions and we'll ask Tom directly during our conversation. So without further ado, welcome, Tom.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you? Thank you so much for joining. First question is, how's family? Everything good over there?
Yeah, all good. I just set him up with dinner upstairs. So Robbie's upstairs eating his dinner with my husband. But good. Yeah, all is good.
End of the day kind of cycle kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
I know. trust me. Okay, it's a privilege and an honor to have you today here. Now, for those connecting, if you don't know who Tom Daley is, and if you haven't seen the video at the beginning, just a quick snippet just to remind everyone, is that Tom is one of the biggest names in the world of diving, and one of the most popular sportsmen in Great Britain, having won medals at every level of the sport, including gold and bronze in the Tokyo Olympics, gold and three world championships, and bronze at both the London and the Rio Olympics. So quite amazing. Tom is now a published author. He has his own YouTube channel. Yay, YouTube. And most recently, he has embarked on a very public global movement to raise awareness of and ultimately eliminate the ongoing homophobia in the sports world. And again, the video that everyone watched speaks about that. We are humbled to have him with us today for this conversation and to hear about the things that make him remarkable. And that's not a very difficult task. All right, Tom. Now, you didn't wake up one day in your life and were a famous sportsman. So this must have started somewhere, sometime in your life. Can you take us back to where all of this started, when Tom was just a kid, no one knew who he was, and how did this whole thing started?
Well, honestly, I grew up in Plymouth, which is in the southwest of the UK, and because it was by the water, my parents felt very strongly that I should learn how to swim and be confident in water. So initially I went to swimming lessons from as young as I can remember. I learned how to swim, and we did all of the swimming in your pajamas to make sure that you'd be able to float if you were out in the water, all of the kind of water safety stuff. And then there was one weekend where I went with my dad and my two younger brothers to a local swimming pool that was different to where I was having my swimming lessons. And I saw people diving off the diving boards, doing all these somersaults and these twists and these flips and then darting into the water. And I was like, wow, like I want to try that. I want to give that a go. And then on that Saturday, following that little taster that I got from just watching, I went down for my first lesson. And I guess you could say the rest is history, because I just absolutely loved it.
But it's just like, you know, what you've described is pretty much what happens to a lot of kids. You know, I haven't heard about the pajama part, so one day you'll tell me about that. But my daughter has having swimming lessons like everyone else. But what was different for you? What made you the super athlete that you became?
I probably would consider myself quite a perfectionist. I like to try and do the very best that I can at anything that I try, no matter what that is, whether that was with school, whether that was with diving. I also did lots of different sports at the same time. So I also did judo to quite a high level. Yeah. And I also played tennis and I played squash, which is a very British sport, really. But I really enjoyed doing lots of different things. One thing I was completely terrible at was football. And I had no interest in trying to get good at that either. But once I got to a stage with diving and judo, I had to make a decision about which sport I was going to choose. I chose diving, obviously. But I think the one thing that I really did that I think, my brother went with me to diving all at the same time, and we were at the very similar level all the way. Although he was 2 years younger than me, he was at the same level that I was. And I think the one thing that I guess was slightly different was that I had this drive to want to be the best and want to try and be like, and really listen and pay attention to the really small details and really try and take it in and be curious and ask questions. Because, I was one of those kids that probably was asking all the stupid questions, but then it just meant that I fully understood every single situation that I was going into. So also I feel like I'm a very technical person. I like to not just know what it looks like, but the biomechanics of it. How does it work? How do you get to that point where you're doing the dive? Where does your body need to be? What is the muscles that you need to work? And that transferred to like sport is such an amazing tool to teach you so much about life that isn't just how to dive. All of those life lessons, the goal setting, the determination, the paying attention to details, all of those things can be used in everyday life.
Amazing. And yet you became this superstar and super athlete at very young age. Tell me a little bit about becoming the center of the attention for so many people and adoration for so many people at such a young age, and how you coped with that. How was that?
I mean, it was a very surreal thing for, I just remember when I was 9 years old, that was the first time that I had any kind of film crew around or anything like that. And they were essentially following 5 athletes that they thought could maybe one day go to the Olympics. So it was like an Olympic Dreams kind of show. And we just followed these 5 athletes, or they followed the 5 athletes. I was one of them. And so that was the first documentary that came out back, I think it was like back in 2005, 4 or 5, like a very long time ago. And then gradually, I think the big breakthrough that happened in order for me to be more known was in 2008 when I qualified for the Beijing Olympics when I was 13. And I didn't really know what it meant. I didn't really take it in. All I knew was that diving was the big thing that I wanted to do and the thing that I've always wanted to be able to do well in. And I knew that the Olympics was the pinnacle of it all. That was the most important thing that you could do by getting onto Team GB and being able to represent our country, wear that kit. And I started manifesting it probably when I was about 9 years old. And I didn't know I was manifesting it at the time, but I had this medal book that I would draw around every medal that I won. And underneath it, I would have what the competition was, where it was, and like some notes to myself about what I thought I could do better.
Perfectionist, somewhat.
Yeah, I know. It's. I look back now and I'm like, what 9-year-old does that? Who was I?
Yeah.
But in the front of that book, I drew a picture of myself doing a handstand, and then wrote London 2012 with the Olympic rings. And at that point, London was still a candidate city, so it hadn't been announced that London was going to host the Olympic Games. But I just felt so strongly that I wanted to be able to go to any Olympic Games, and I was incredibly lucky to have been to 4 now. So it's been a ride and it's been a whirlwind. But I think the main thing was just being able to really never lose sight of that end goal.
Yeah, but at the same time, question to you is like, you have all this attention, and yet you found a way to stay grounded. I guess sports helps with that, but it's very easy for anyone to just lose perspective. You became adored by crowds of people. You drew a lot of attention even before all the activist part that you've developed much later. And the question I've always have is how at a younger age people can continue to feel grounded and stay sane and stay focused.
I like you say, in sport's not very glamorous. Sport is hard. Sport is like blood, sweat, tears, ugly. Like most of the thing, the only thing that people see is the glory side of it, and most of the time it's not that. And I have such an amazing and supportive set of friends, and my family is incredible. And my family, like my brothers, for example, the kind that if I came fourth, they'd be like, haha, you came fourth, you're terrible, like do better. And I would just be like, yeah, okay, fair, like I need to do better. So I'd never had anyone that would treat me any differently. And I grew up in Plymouth. Like I was miles away from anything that was any kind of, Plymouth's lovely. I grew up there. It's my home, but it wasn't like living in London or New York or LA where there was all of these things all the time. Like I lived a very normal life. I was going to school and I was doing all of those things. And school was very difficult and challenging for me at certain points, especially going to an Olympic Games in 8th grade. Like it was 8th going into 9th grade and then going back to school. It was a very surreal and weird and like very difficult thing for me to do, to go back to school, because of like the way that I was treated when I got back, and it was not in any way what I thought how I was going to be treated. And so there were lots of challenges that came with it. So I think that very much that kept me grounded in that way, that I just had to keep my head down and keep working towards what I love doing.
Yeah. And just like that, in 2013 on YouTube, you decided to come out. That was a big moment for me.
Yes.
As a gay man. It was important. It meant a lot. It meant a lot to all my friends. It meant a lot to the community. It had a huge impact in worldwide, really. And would love to talk about that. Would love to talk about where that had come from, what. So number one, why? What happened in the moment that made you do that? Number two, why go on YouTube? Thank you for that. But why going on YouTube? Why choosing such a global proclamation? And what were you hoping to achieve?
Oh, there were so many different reasons for it, if I'm being honest. One, I I'd met my now husband, Lance, in the March of 2013, and kind of flipped, like it was at a period of my life where I was really struggling. I'd just done the London 2012 Olympic Games and achieved an Olympic medal in front of a home crowd and was so over the moon and excited. And then, like when you were talking earlier about being grounded, like we were back to reality. I was back to training. I had to go back to school and finish my A-levels. I had to, get ready for my next competition, and life went on. And I was like, what now? What next? Where do I go? What is my purpose now that I've done this thing that I've been dreaming of since I was 9 years old? And I was also struggling with one of my dives mentally. I was having these mental blocks and not being able to take off, like similar to how Simone Biles last year was talking about twisties. I was suffering with that. And so every day felt like such a struggle. And it was hard to be in such a dark place and not really be able to have anyone to talk to, because I couldn't talk to any of my diving friends about winning an Olympic medal because they hadn't won an Olympic medal and I didn't. And yet then you can't be like, well, stop complaining because you've won an Olympic medal. And then there was also this underlayer of knowing that I wanted to be able to figure out what my sexuality was, but there was no way that I could do that without the fear of being outed, without the fear of being lured into something and then outed, or like, what would people think? What would people say? And being able to have to deal with that from such a young age in a public eye, and people constantly asking, do you have a girlfriend? Do you have a girlfriend? And I'll be like, no, I don't. Focusing on my diving. And I just never wanted to be caught in a lie of anything, because I didn't want anyone to ever think that I was ashamed of who I was. But then I just thought, everything was all a bit of fun. I was figuring out who I was. And I then met Lance, my now husband. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I'm in trouble here. Like this is it. Like I didn't actually think I'd ever actually fall in love with a guy. And then it was like, oh, like, well, here we go. Like, what are we going to do now? And I didn't want to do anything too quickly rash, because I thought, I need to see if I actually am going to be with this guy, because I don't want to just come out for the sake of coming out in that sense, because I was terrified about what people would say, what people would think, how it would affect my sponsors and things like that, because I had lost my dad 2 years previous. So I was like the man of the house and I had to support my family. And it was then 6 weeks after I met Lance in LA that we went on a bike ride down in Plymouth. And at that point, I just came right out with it, because I wanted to know. I was like, do you ever see yourself getting married? And can you imagine having kids? and which took him a little bit by surprise, I think. Probably broke every single rule of dating. But on that trip, we actually named, we came up with a boy's name and a girl's name while we were on that bike ride. And Robbie Ray, our son, is now 4 years old and has just started primary school, or elementary school, which is kind of surreal. But the actual coming out bit, it got to December of that year. So after like 9 months of being with Lance, that like I was being asked all of these questions and things started to be like posted and like rumors and all of that kind of stuff. And I just got to a point where I was like, I don't want to have to be outed, and I don't want to have to live in that constant fear, or going out for dinners and bringing in one of my friends, Sophie, along with us, so that it was never seen as like weird. And so then I was like, you know what, I need to think about how to actually come out. And I didn't want to do it in a way that was like on a TV show where people could ask follow-up questions. I didn't want to have to do it in a newspaper where people could twist my words. And the way I communicated with most of the people that followed me was online. Was either like, so YouTube for me was the best way to do it, because I was able to say exactly what I wanted to say, nothing more, nothing less. And if anybody had any follow-up questions, they couldn't ask them. We would just be like, I've said everything I want to say in that YouTube video for now, and just let me be for a moment. And it was so terrifying to press, like, for it to go live and to publish it. And I was so worried about what the ramifications would be, because there weren't really many out athletes at the top of their game. Most athletes that come out are like have retired or are towards the end of their career. And I just felt such a relief for just finally being able to be like, you know what, I'm me. And if you don't like me, then so what? I don't care. But it changed dramatically the way that I was able to dive, because I didn't have that burden and that weight weighing down on me.
So do you think that had an impact on your diving? I was just wondering. So the fact that you lifted that weight off of your back, was that important for your diving?
Yeah, I think every athlete that you would ask that has come out will tell you that feeling of like constantly worrying about being caught. You know, being an athlete and growing up and going to school, all of that is already stressful enough. You add into things about worrying about what people are going to think about you if you came out, and being in the public eye and being able to do that at the same time, and then worrying about what sponsors would say. And, you know, I feel like now we have progressed such a long way in those 9 years, where I feel like people are starting to, you know, be more embracing of athletes coming out, which is just incredible. And, you know, even just looking back to the Olympics last year, there were more out athletes at the last Olympics than all of the previous Olympics combined. So visibility like matters.
Yeah, it matters a lot, and you really started that movement, so it's just incredible. But so you sorted it out for yourself. You decided to come out. You made it public. You drew a lot of attention. Hopefully, it helped you with your career. But then you were not happy with that. You took the next level and to say, not only I'm going to do this, but then now I'm going to talk about how we need to change the rules of the game. Pun intended, around the world. And you started with the Commonwealth countries, and just like that, you shot a documentary with the BBC, and that documentary speaks about it's called Illegal to Be Me. And it's about putting a focus and a perspective on what's happening in Commonwealth countries where legislation and culturally it's not acceptable to be an LGBT person. And actually, being an LGBT person is not only illegal, but it puts you in danger. Do you want to share with us a little bit where this idea came from, and why are you doing that? Why did you do the documentary? What do you expect to see as a consequence of that?
You know, there's lots of reasons for it, honestly. One, it's kind of necessary to start trying to push for change. I mean, when I first came out, I didn't really want to like draw any extra attention. I was just like, well, it's done. I'm just going to like carry on with my sport now and just like chug along. But once it was actually in 2018, after the Commonwealth Games on the Gold Coast, I was sat with my husband, my mum, and we were just having a burger and fries. And I just sat there and I was like, I am so lucky to have just won the Commonwealth Games, be sitting here with my husband and my mum, and without any worry or any fear of being persecuted, for being treated differently, for being harmed. And I was just thinking, all of there's other Commonwealth countries, you know, of course, in the Olympics as well, and worldwide, not just the Commonwealth. But I was just like, this can't be right that in over half of the Commonwealth countries, it is still illegal. Like my existence would be illegal. And still to this day, there's 3 countries where it's punishable by death. So in the Commonwealth. And, you know, which is like, again, it blew my mind. And I think so many young people growing up now don't necessarily have the same, like, you know, it's not taught like that in schools to be like, you know, this is what it's like here and this is what it's like around the rest of the world. And so I just thought, I started off working with like trying to figure out these things. And as we started this campaign, it became this like, oh, maybe this needs to be more than just me doing it behind the scenes. This needs to be visible. This needs to be something that people see, so it actually makes some noise. So I traveled around the Commonwealth. I went to Pakistan, where the maximum penalty is death by stoning. I traveled to Jamaica, where the maximum penalty is 10 years in prison with hard labor. I spoke to people from athletes from Nigeria, where, again, the maximum penalty is death by stoning in the northern states. So I had spoken to lots of different athletes all around the Commonwealth, asking them, because initially I went into the documentary and into the campaign thinking no country that has anti-LGBT laws should be allowed to host the Commonwealth Games or any sporting event. But then going around the Commonwealth, understanding the origins of these homophobic laws, understanding the colonial history with the laws, and then coming in as a privileged white gay man saying that, oh, maybe these countries shouldn't be allowed to host, is further oppressing those countries rather than trying to create an ethos and a morality clause within the Commonwealth Games contract that says we want as many people to host these Commonwealth Games. But to host these Commonwealth Games, like you have to have the pride flag flying in the stadium. You have to be inclusive of LGBT people, have a pride house, have somewhere for a safe space for LGBT people to come. But we would love for you to host it if you can meet these requirements. And then also, but the one thing that was so clear around the Commonwealth that I spoke to every athlete was visibility. That the pride flag in the UK, I maybe in America too, take it for granted. You see it, like, oh, pride flag, cool, yeah, whatever, walk past it. But to so many people around the Commonwealth where that flag is illegal, seeing that is a sign of safety and it's a sign of hope, which then became the big push for the Commonwealth Games, was to do this really big moment, powerful moment, to be able to have what 1 billion eyes watch the opening ceremony of the Commonwealth Games. So to have that be broadcast live all over the Commonwealth, to see people carrying the flag, I was carrying the torch, but then the flags were carried by people from all around the Commonwealth where their existence is illegal, or in some cases relatively newly not illegal, but representing some of those 35 countries in the Commonwealth where their existence is, like, would be illegal. So, and it was just something that I've felt very passionate about. And, you know, Commonwealth Games is just the start. You know, they've got the World Cup in Qatar at the end of this year for football or soccer. And it's just, again, it's really difficult, not just for the athletes as well. It's about, like, what about the spectators that want to go and visit? And what about the athletes' families? Because, you know, not being funny, the athletes are, wherever they go, are going to be protected in a way because they're in a bubble. They're in the village, or they're in, like, a hotel, and it's like back and forth. And they're not really living there. They're not the people. But then you've got the people that are going there as spectators or as tourists that are going to go there. And will they be safe? I don't know. And that's the big question, I guess.
That's incredible. On behalf of the community, I don't speak for them, but it's just so incredible to see the work that you're doing. The impact is tremendous. Just the fact that you are igniting and triggering conversations, even in those countries. And some of the conversations may be unpleasant and other ones are of hope. But the fact that you are bringing that hope and that light to all those countries is just incredible. And there should be a lot of other Toms, not dying because there's only one, but maybe other Toms should be doing that work. All right, let's change tacks a little bit.
Yes.
Because here we are. You found your voice. You decided to come out, and the next thing you know is you decided to say, not only this is good for me, but I also have to change this for everyone else. And then you took on the task of spreading the word and bringing hope around the world. But then you decided to start knitting.
Yes.
which is like coming from the left field, not expecting, and you became a global sensation in the knitting world. You started your YouTube channel and you do lots of knitting. Now you gotta tell us, what the hell is that? Where does it come from? Because I could, if I'm writing a story or a book about you, and if you were a character in a novel, I would imagine a lot of things. Here's what I would not come up with. He would then become a superpower in the knitting world. So tell us about that.
Oh gosh, long story. Well, not really, but so essentially my coach said to me that I'm terrible at sitting still and I'm terrible at resting and recovering on the weekends. And you need to find something that you can do to just chill out and sit down. So then my husband said, oh, he's a filmmaker. And he said, on sets, there's some actors and there's some producers that while they're waiting, they might knit some squares or do something like that as a way to relax and unwind and be mindful and almost like meditation. I was like, oh, I'll give it a go. Why not? I'll try it. And I actually first tried knitting, sitting in this very chair, actually, back in March 2020, literally just before lockdown. And I started it and I was terrible. And I just watched tons of YouTube tutorials on, honestly, like YouTube University, really. I taught myself so many things from YouTube, but I taught myself how to knit. And then I also had help from other athletes from around the world because our last competition was in Canada at the beginning of March. So there was an Australian diver, a Russian diver, and a British coach and a Chinese coach that saw me like struggling to try and do it and were coming over and helping and showing me. And gradually by the end, I got the hang of it.
Are you telling me other athletes and coaches were they were knitting as well.
Knitting. Yeah, they knew how to knit. And I didn't know. And I'd never seen anyone else knit before in my life. And I was like, wait, you know how to knit? And like people would like, that's what they would do when they got back to their rooms, and they were keeping it really like close to their chest. But I was doing it I was doing it while we were at dinner. I was doing it when we were on the buses. I was just like, any moment I could, I wanted to try and get good at it. And that's where my perfectionism kind of came in. But then for every project that I learned, I tried a new skill, a new technique, a new stitch. And then I learned how to crochet. And then once I got to a certain point, I then started to come up with my own designs and my own things. And it was just before the Olympics that my team, my management team said to me, like, what do you want to do after the Olympics? You want to do like a podcast or a TV show? Like, what is it you want to do? And I said, honestly, I'd love to just sit on the beach with a margarita and knit. And they were like, ha, 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 ha. And I was like, well, no, seriously, I do. But then, you know, I was like I say, I would knit everywhere on my way to training, on my way on the buses to training in the village, in the dining hall, in the stands. And I was just doing it because during the Olympics, during a COVID Olympics, there was no socializing. You couldn't go out of the village. You couldn't do anything. So there was so much time to overthink and start worrying about your competition, worrying about things you couldn't control. But for me, knitting was my, like, I could just zone in on what was exactly in front of me, be present, be in the moment. And I honestly think it was my superpower that helps win an Olympic gold medal, because I was calmer and had a greater perspective on life than I'd ever had before because of it. And after that, you know, being photographed in the stands knitting and these videos are coming out, I was like, what on earth is going on? My like social media accounts like blew up on overnight for my knitting and for my channel. And I was just like, what is going on? This is surreal. And then I got home and I was like, I think we should actually try to start something with knitting. And then it started as an Instagram, Made with Love by Tom Daley. And I was like, you know what about if I came up with these designs that we could then send out yarn, needles, patterns of how to do it, and all of the instructions that you're going to need to be able to make the things that I've designed with jumpers, hats, scarves, all that kind of stuff. So we set up Made with Love by Tom Daley for like yarn kits and for, you know, and it's been the design process and going into all of that has been so fascinating and so exciting, and working into soon to be available, like ready to wear stuff that you don't have to knit yourself. I've been working on a knitting and crochet book that comes out next month. And it's just basically knitting and crochet has become my life, and I love it. I literally cannot get enough of it. And it's one of those things, again, you probably wouldn't imagine me to knit, but yep. And the interesting thing about community is that, you know, you have the LGBT community that I was welcomed into, and then you have the knitting and crochet and crafts community. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like a whole nother world. And everybody is like really caring and gives advice. And it's just really cool to be part of something like that. And also to go back to doing things handmade, going slow, slowing down, gifting the things that you've made as well. Like there's just something that feels really good about making something yourself.
And tell me more about why you called the line Made with Love. It's such an amazing and such a beautiful name. Where does that come from?
You know, it actually came from the fact that I was so proud of some of the things that I was making, that I was like, I wanted to post them online. I wanted to like post it on Instagram. Here's a picture of my knitting, but I didn't want people to be like, oh my gosh, what's he doing? Unfollow. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to make up a page that's literally just for my knitting. And I didn't know what to call it. But then I also I made a scarf for my mum. That was one of the first things that I made. And I wanted to get these like labels that I could sew into it, like that said that it was made by me. And so I went onto this website to buy these labels, and you could customize them. And I was like, oh, this is fun. And I like typed in, and I was like, Made with Love by Tom Daley. And because I was like, to my mum, I was like, I'm like, made it with love. So I was like, Made with Love by Tom Daley. And it had all these different options for like emojis. Like I could have had a unicorn or a dinosaur or whatever it may be. And I saw a heart there, and I was like, I'm going to click on that heart. And then I had the options of colors, and then it came up with this rainbow thing. And then all of a sudden,
one you're using.
Yeah, it's on the wrong side here. Yeah. So then I was like, there was an embroidered rainbow heart, and I was like, it's like, looks like knit stitches. And so it came as these little labels, and I was like, maybe that could be the name of my Instagram. So I typed in Made with Love by Tom Daley, and funnily enough, nobody had that name. So I started posting on there, and gradually, like over the year leading up to the Olympics, I had like 60,000 followers going into the Olympics. And then after those posts were like, people would see me knitting, it all of a sudden went out to like 1.2 or 1.3 million followers overnight. The people wanting to know what I was knitting next. And I was like, what on earth is this? And it was like madness.
Wow, it's incredible. So from just a reminder, everyone that is following us, you can ask questions to Tom. Just use the chat box, and we will find time, of course, to pose the questions to Tom. So as we go through the journey that you've just talked to us about, from someone in Plymouth, like very young age, just thought about swimming first and then diving, and then maybe become an expert on that. And then you needed to find inside of you the courage and the voice to be able to say to everyone, this is what I'm going to do. Again, as you start winning medals and start getting a lot of attention, you have to find strength inside of you to change your voice and say, hey, beyond just being your adored athlete, I'm also a gay man, and I want to tell you all about this. And this requires strength, and requires courage, and requires the ability to go inside of you and find that strength to speak up. And then the next thing you know, not only you do that, but you find the strength and you find a voice to say, no, I'm going to actually speak for the community, and trying to change where I can, and try to influence where I can the change for others in countries such as the Commonwealth. And not only that, now you're going to talk about sports. So it's not only in the Commonwealth community, but also it's beyond, and just talking about Qatar, all of the, and then you find inside of you a voice for knitting, and you say, you know what, I don't care, I'm just going to do this. So a lot of people, today listening to you want to know, how does that process go along? Because it must be a lonely place where at some point in time, no matter the noise around you, no matter who you have around you, I'm sure you must have you described lots of insecurities, lots of fears, lots of concerns about how people will take it once you express that voice. And I'm Remarkable is about that. It's about finding inside of you a space, finding your voice, and declare it to the world, and being unafraid, and being confident about it. And would love for you to explain to all of us how that process is for Tom Daley, because you are a human being like everyone else. You have fears, insecurities, moments of loneliness. So how do you go about it?
Absolutely. I mean, all of the above. I mean, I've struggled in so many ways. I mean, doing things like advocacy and like activist stuff, that's kind of like the scariest thing and the hardest thing, is because not everybody agrees with you. Not everybody is going to agree with your views. But honestly, and like I've struggled with body image things. I've had eating disorders, and I've really struggled with lots of different things of mental health when it comes to nerves and anxiety going into things. And I just got to a point, and I think it was becoming a parent, which was the real changing and turning point for me. It was like, you know what? You learn to realize how many things you used to hold on to and you used to worry about and concern yourself with that you just don't have time for anymore. And you're just like, oh my God, like, why did I used to worry that I burnt a piece of toast? Or why did I used to worry that I was, going to, like, I don't know, tie my shoelaces up the wrong way? I don't know, whatever it is, like all of those little things I would just let go of, because there was all of a sudden this human being that to take care of, is like your be all and end all, and it's your most important thing in your world. And I think that for me gave me a huge sense of perspective on what really matters most. And I tend to be quite a positive person anyway. And I've learned over the years, being kind of in the public eye, like you say, it's not worrying and caring about what other people think of you. Because I really used to think like that. That was what stopped me from coming out and exploring who I was earlier. And it gets to a point where, like, what you start letting slowly but surely, as I've gotten older, like I've started to let go of all of that weight that just used to weigh me down. And when I let go of things, in a way, it works the same way as when I came out. you let go of that burden, strip it off of you. Sometimes that's just a matter of speaking out about it, being able to talk about it. And that's something that I think also the pandemic has done really well for lots of people. Is before the pandemic, nobody really talked that intensely about mental health or any struggles that you might have. And I think then being able to have this insight into how many people have struggled through this pandemic and are now able to talk more openly and more freely about how they feel and what they're thinking. And I think that for me has been something that I very much confided in my husband with that. And because for the longest of times I was very shut off. I really didn't let anyone in, because after I lost my dad in 2011, you know, it hurt so much that I shut it off. I didn't even bother grieving. I never talked about it. I never wanted to say anything. I kind of stopped everything that would remind me of him. I would just not do. And it wasn't until my husband was like, why is it that you don't talk about your dad? Why have you stopped talking? And I just was like, you know what? I actually don't know. And it was like this moment of feeling like I'm worried that I would lose someone that I loved again. And I didn't want to let anyone get too close. And actually, you know, while you're living, life is worth living and life is loving. And you just have to be able to let all of that love in. And if you don't let the love in, you can never be the person that can give love to other people and be your best self. So all of those things are things that I've learned from, you know, having to go away from a young age and like working in the world of sport and going through that. And, you know, now, like, you know, like I say, I've been with Lance now for coming up for 10 years. We've been married for 5 years and our son is 4, which is kind of nuts to think about that, to be honest.
Yeah. Incredible. Lots of lessons in there for the people that are listening to us. I have a question around backlash. So I'm sure, as you said, not everyone agrees with you coming out. No, and certainly does not. Surely a lot of people will not agree what you did and for the Commonwealth, the statements you make around Qatar and other events. Maybe some people, certainly that happens in my case, people don't like you forming families and having children, and you being a public figure, unlike me, you get that backlash in a very public way. So again, to the question of finding the confidence and finding your voice, how do you stay sane? How do you stay okay? And how do you handle with that backlash?
Yeah, it's one of those things that you can spend lots of time worrying about what other people think. And it was actually a very good lesson that my dad taught me, because I used to think my dad was the most embarrassing person on planet Earth. And everywhere we went, he would be trying to make me laugh and doing all of these silly things. And I would be like, oh my gosh, like, what are you doing? But he literally just did not care what other people thought of him. He was just himself. He just did his thing and he was completely comfortable in who he was. And he always said that, like, I don't care what other people think, because he had a brain tumor, and he got to the point in his life where he just didn't care anymore what other people thought. And because he knew it was a terminal diagnosis and he just had to live his life. And there are so many powerful lessons that I now realize as a parent and as I've gotten older, that, you know, you have to, as long as you know that you are being the best person that you can be, and as long as you know that you are doing best by your friends, by your family, and doing the best that you can, that's all that you can ever ask for. And I think anything around and aside from that is noise that you just don't need.
Is everyone taking notes? Because I am. There's a lot of wisdom in this man. Okay. I think we're going to go to questions now, if that's okay. Let's take a look at some of the questions that are popping up. Are you ready, Tom?
Yes, I am ready.
Okay. So Lillian is asking, if you had to pick only one, diving or knitting, which would it be?
Is that like now or for my whole life? I'm gonna if I had to choose right now, honestly, I'd say knitting, because I'm getting old. I'm only going to be able to dive for like another 5 years, if that. I'm the oldest on the diving team. So yeah, I'd probably have to say knitting at this point, because it's I could be doing that, or like, I mean, that's the, demographic for knitting of what it had been, is like older things, so I can do it for the rest of my life, to be honest.
Well, we have lots of creators on YouTube, as you know, around knitting, and not necessarily old people. So I think the
No,
demographics are actually changing, and you must be driving that change as well. So there's a
there's
lot of, don't you think?
yeah, there's lots of that. Like that's the thing with this knitting community that I've like been welcomed into. It's like, oh my gosh, there are lots of people that are knitting and lots of people that really enjoy it. And so also a bonding thing sometimes between grandparents and grandkids. And I also would love to one day create a curriculum for schools to teach, an after school club of like knitting or crochet, just to be able to, try and promote some of that mindfulness and creating a new skill and being able to make something for themselves and get away from, just like, I don't know, I guess of playing too many video games and things like that, being able to like do something for themselves.
Yeah. I have this feeling that you're not stopping at knitting. I mean, you were doing judo and squash,
Yeah, exactly.
and diving, and I suspect now you're already talking about post-school curriculum management. I don't know. I have a sense that in 3 years there's going to be something else. Okay, Scott. Scott is asking, what is your advice for balancing a passion project alongside a full-time job? For example, being an Olympic diver alongside a content creator.
Honestly, I look back at my career and how often I was training. I would leave the house at 7:30. I would be training from 8 till, I don't know. Well, again, when I was at school, it was completely different. But balancing maybe like 5 to 6 hours a day of training, along with all of my schoolwork and going to school in between those training sessions, and then creating content to post a YouTube video every week. And I don't know how I had enough hours in the day. I now look back, and obviously without a child, it was easier to be able to fit all of those things in. Like now it is near impossible to be able to do all of that stuff. But, I was doing things. I also found even leading into the Olympics last year, I think because it's such a high stress environment, I keep myself so busy. I was knitting. Don't have as many now, but I had 250 house plants that I would go around and water and care for every day as part of a routine. I was training 6 hours a day. I was, obviously looking after our son when I would take him to nursery, go to training, pick him up from nursery, and then go back home, cook dinner, knit, care for the plants, put Robbie to bed, sit and knit. And it was lots of things going on all at once. And I just think it's, now I kind of am doing all kinds of other things with the activism and all that kind of stuff too. And it's been, it's extremely difficult, and there aren't enough hours in the day at all. But, I haven't set foot on a diving board actually since the Olympics last year. But I'm going in tomorrow to see my coach and have a dive. So I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, amazing. I'm going to put some money on you developing a gardening line.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just saying. I just picked up garden over there. All right. Let's hear from Jane. Jane says, Tom, you are so incredibly inspirational. Yeah, that's true. What would you say to someone who hasn't found the courage to come out yet? What would you say to allies on how they can make a massive difference? I'm proud to be a mom of my incredible trans son and working hard to work out on our LGBTQ plus ERG to create the safest place for everyone to be unapologetically their awesome selves. So what would you say for those who don't have the courage to come out yet?
It's one of those things that everyone has to come out in their own time. Some people will say everybody has to come out and scream it from the rooftops, but actually, having gone around the Commonwealth this last year, it's not as easy as just coming out. There are ramifications for people in certain countries, and I think everyone will find their own time and everyone will be able to do it in their own pace. But the one thing I would say is, for me, I was able to tell my best friend Sophie, and when I was able to tell her, just one person that I knew I could trust and I knew would probably be totally fine with, it made a huge difference to just be able to be myself in front of one person. And that kind of started like a trickling down effect, honestly. And I think that's something that I would encourage people to do, is just find that one person at least that they can confide in.
That's right. The other thing I always say to people is I'm yet still to find one person that has come out and has regretted.
Mm.
That is something that usually tips people over. Like
Yeah.
I've never found anybody who has come out and says, I wish I hadn't done it, as hard as it may have been. So I leave that to Jane as well as an idea. All right, Charles wants to know, which of your achievements so far are you most proud of and why? I think I know, but let's see.
I mean, the achievement I'm most proud of is raising a son. I'm raising a kid.
That's
Like,
right.
you know, it's funny because it beats any kind of Olympic medal, world championship medal. It just doesn't. There's something about like picking him up from school today and going and seeing him in his little uniform in the UK, and like you go to the school gate and he's like looking to see you, and then you wave and he's like, Papa, and I'm like, ah, and it's just like there's nothing better than that. So yeah, that's definitely he's the thing I'm most proud of for sure.
Yeah, amazing. Chad is asking, I recently proposed to my partner of 4 years and he said yes. Yay. And I was wondering if you have any wedding or marriage advice. Oh, this is
good
fun.
one.
This is fun.
This is a good one. We originally had a wedding planner, didn't quite work out. So I ended up doing it myself.
Because you're not a perfectionist.
Because I'm not a perfectionist and not a control freak at all. I wasn't like Bridezilla, or Groomzilla, but I was. I just. My mum was the one who found the venue because she was like, "Oh my gosh, have you thought about going to Bovey Castle?" And I was like, "I don't know, I haven't seen it before." So I went and found it. But okay, so in terms of advice, one thing that we did, and we made sure we did on the day one, was always find time for each other, because you're going to be going around seeing so many different people all at once and seeing everyone. Just even if you just have like this knowing look across the room where you kind of just make eye contact, because it's going to go by in a flash. And in terms of people to invite, I don't know if we did it the most traditional way, but we only invited the people that we wanted to be able to have dinner and party with afterwards. Of course, all of the closest family were there, but if a great Auntie Zelda or whatever it was, we'll go out for another time with them. And also, if friends that we hadn't spoken to in the last 6 months, maybe that they weren't there either. So it was like that was one of our rules. If we haven't spoken to them or seen them in the last 6 months, maybe they shouldn't be at the wedding. If you needed to cut down on numbers.
Good advice. Now, he asked for a wedding advice. He also asked for a marriage advice.
Oh, okay, that's a good one. So marriage advice, Lance and I, never go to sleep mad at each other is one piece of advice. And also, whenever we get into bed, we always ask each other what the best and worst thing of our day was. And being able to do that just opens up those lines of communication to be able to say, like, I really enjoyed this in my day. And if they weren't there, or like, there's been some times where Lance has been like, what was the worst part of your day? And I'm like, you were the worst part of my day. But, to being able to have those conversations, and, we laugh about it, but it is always good to be able to have the best and worst part of your day out there.
Get it out. Okay, Igor has a question. I am a hobby diver, so I have a question regarding diving. What can you recommend to do to overcome fear and uncertainty when doing new or difficult dives? What are the steps to train to be mentally strong?
Yeah, there are. It's tough, and especially when you're learning new skills, you're diving into darkness, you're diving into the unknown, because you've never done the skill, you don't know what's going to be the outcome of it.
Yeah.
But like, if you're doing the right build-ups and you're doing the right lead-ups into doing a dive, you'll be able to. You just have to try and break it down into your head into those different steps, and also just be patient. There have been periods of time where I wasn't able to jump off a diving board because I was too scared or too worried or whatever it may be, but it'll come. You just have to be patient.
Okay. Very good. Okay. Let's see if we have more questions. Yes. Millie wants to know, what are your favorite places to compete in the world?
Oh, good question. My favorite diving pool is, and especially the one that, my favorite looking diving pool is Barcelona. Barcelona has an incredible diving pool. And if you get a chance, just have a little search of Barcelona diving pool, because it's like this outdoor pool that overlooks the whole city, and you see the cityscape in the background. It's right up on the hills there, and it's so beautiful. So I definitely say Barcelona was one of my favorite pools to look at. But to dive in, I would probably say the easiest pool to dive in was Tokyo or Beijing. There was something about it that was spacious and easy to see everything.
Amazing. So Millie, get your tickets to Barcelona.
Yes.
Very good. Before we start wrapping up, we could go on and on for like hours and hours, but you don't have those hours. You have to get that kid to bed.
Yes.
But before we go, there's two things I have to ask you. The first one is, what would you like to ask of this community, and how can they all be part of the movement you have started to strive for equality, both in sporting world and beyond? So either they're part of a community or they're allies. What can they do from your perspective?
I think everyone really has a responsibility to be there for other minorities, not just your own minority, and showing up for yourself. Show up for other people and trying to build those bridges, because together as minorities is what makes us a majority and can make us really strong. So being able to be there for other people that isn't necessarily going to affect you, but standing up for other people is important.
All right. So step up, everybody. There's instructions from Tom. Now, all our guests and friends, and speakers in our events, we always ask the same question: what do you think makes you remarkable?
It's a tough question, and I would know we spoke about this earlier. And without, honestly, I think being a parent and an athlete at the same time, as well as being able to create knitting, if I don't say so myself, masterpiece creations, because but I think those things all together, sometimes if you take a step back, I think one thing that everyone can do, and I think perspective is something that makes me remarkable. Being able to sit there and list out some of the things that I'm really grateful for, that I'm really thankful for, and being able to just have this feeling of how lucky I've been to have worked so hard and been able to have the opportunity to do something that I've loved for so long, but wanting to still continue to fight for other people to be able to have the same opportunities and to be able to, make, I guess, the world a better place for minorities that are around the world.
A super champion in diving, a super champion for the LGBT community, and a super knitter and future gardener and a wonderful dad. I mean, how many Toms live inside of you? I think you're remarkable because you have 10 people living inside of you that all of us could look up to and aspire to become. Thank you for being an example. Thank you for being so visible. Thank you. Visibility is about generosity. Thank you for bringing that generosity to everyone so that everyone can benefit from, feel inspired, and change their own lives. So I can, on behalf of everyone at I Am Remarkable, I want to thank you for finding the time in between getting your family fed to be with us, inspire all of us. And thank you. Thank you again, Tom. It was truly a privilege to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Okay. Right. So for everyone, thank you for being with us today. If you go on Google and you Google I Am Remarkable Week, you will have access to the full program. You can check it out of the stuff that is still coming up this week. We have a busy schedule. You can check it over here. But as I said, go on Google and check it out for yourselves. I Am Remarkable Week 2022, and you'll be able to pick the sessions. Please come to as many as you can. They are terrific. Regarding Tom, please don't forget to check his BBC documentary, Illegal to Be Me. It's quite inspiring. And also check out the Made with Love line of knitting from Tom. I'm going to buy my Christmas shopping after this on Made with Love. Tomorrow, just to remind everyone, we're going to have Venus Williams here as well. So as you can see, we are on a streak of champions and we want to hear from them. Thanks everyone for coming. Once again, thank you, Tom, for being with us today. And everyone else, go on Google, find your next session and join us. Thank you.